Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Munganyende with my colleague Heleen. The reason why we were invited today is to tell you something about a project that we've been working on for almost 2 years. It's called, with the working title, Home Away from Home. And it's a project, a writing project and a multidisciplinary project about African neighborhoods in Europe. So most of the stories that we've heard this afternoon are they approach violence that is put onto the black female body in like a bodily way, and we'd like to think about African neighborhoods in Europe as representative of those bodies, as often representative of femme bodies that and even male black bodies that are also put through a lot of violence that we've learned to call, for example, gentrification, marginalization, and that we like to solve through community diversity programs. Or I should say that white institutions like to do that. And the reason why I'd say we think this is like a project that should be highlighted is because our realities as women living in the diaspora, specifically in the Low Countries, in Belgium and the Netherlands, we believe that this is an underrepresented story about finding home away from home. So I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Heleen to tell us a bit about how we met and yeah.
Hi, I won't tell all the details about how we met because that would be a little private and a bit messy. No, I'm kidding. So what happened was, I was doing a project, a writing residency in Paris, and I was finding it very hard to find a place. I'd never really liked Paris. I thought it was a very grandiose and very violent city in a way. Everything's expensive, everyone's looking at you. And so after some time I decided, look, I'm just done with this. I'm just gonna go to Chateau Rouge. It's quiet there. It has my vibe, all the stuff. And Chateau Rouge is a neighborhood right next to Montmartre, where which is one of the oldest Sub-Saharan African neighborhoods in Europe. And I met a journalist there called Moussa Diop. And we were talking, he told me a story about the neighborhood and the things that were happening there, the refurbishment of the metro. He was also saying that the Marché de Chateau Rouge, which was the very old market where vendors were selling fish and fruits and vegetables, was going to be moved to outside of the Paris city limits, and they were going to call it Marché des Continents. So it's called Markets of the Continents, and they were going to throw in, the Chinese market, a Brazilian market, make it exotic and all that stuff. And that was very interesting to me because at the same time, in Matonge in Belgium, in Brussels where I live, a thing was going on where the mayor of XL, which is the commune where Matonge is in, said that she was going to change the name of Matonge into the
Continental neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know how to translate.
In French.
Yeah, what was it? Quartier des Continents. So it's like a similar thing where it's like you want to, it felt like you want to make something that is distinctly African, distinctly black, and distinctly cultural. It's a very cultural space into something that is non-threatening, that is exotified and made so much more palpable for the masses, whoever those masses are. And out of that idea, I decided I really want to make something about these places and learn more about these places because as a diaspora in Europe, we are getting a lot bigger each year, and I think, but at the same time, we see these historic places that we have created disappearing. And I was like, I don't want to do like, so this is the quote that says here, I don't want to say like this is already dying, and I don't want to make us more fearful than we are, but I do want to write an anthology before something disappears that is of importance to us, to show that we are here and we've been here for a very long time. And now I haven't told how we met, so let's...
So the romantic story about how we met. I ironically did the same writing residence, enrolled into the same writing residence as Heleen a year later. And at the time, I had started debuting into like the mainstream kind of Dutch media, which was a very wide space. And even that residence to me felt like a kind of like an estranging experience, because of the fact that growing up in white majority countries and in white majority spaces, even like your body, even being present in the room, being present within that institution is already disruptive. So to me, that was like kind of like an iffy, I don't know, like experience. And then after that, I needed to talk to someone who had gone through the same particular things, and also a writer that could relate to a similar background, like coming from African descendants, in like, you know, not in a singular way, in the ways that we like to look at it, like, you know, multidimensional. So I met Heleen through Twitter, because she had in her Twitter bio, she had self-medicating on Afrobeat and everything Afro-Europe. So I was like, yes. And also my second name is her first name, so that was also pretty lit. So yeah, that's how we met, and that's how we started talking about, okay, we both grew up in these white majority spaces, in these white majority cities, and have found solace, have found like great relief in visiting and from time to time visiting spaces that did represent us. And those spaces were specifically embodied in the form of African neighborhoods in Europe. So when we started having this discussion, we came up with like 7 cities that we wanted to research. We wanted to research Matonge, which he has mentioned, which is the African neighborhood of Belgium. We wanted to research Amsterdam, the neighborhood of the Bijlmer, which is majority Ghanaian and Afro-Caribbean. And then we wanted to research the neighborhoods of Peckham and in London, the neighborhoods of Peckham and Brixton. And Notting Hill. And we at the time we were visiting these neighborhoods and staying, for example, in the case of London, we were staying in Peckham because we had to choose like a point to focalize on. So yeah, that's.
I see you.
Yeah. So that's how we started the research, and yeah, there were some pretty cool findings that we did, and because we are both writers, we're gonna like publish it in various ways. But maybe let's talk a little bit about the findings first, like what kind of like things spoke to us when we were there.
Yeah. So this is a visual of one way we will be representing the places we go. You can see a map here, there's numbers here, and you will be able to click on them, and you will have either stories or videos or archival photography. It's a very long process to create something like this, so let's hope it's here in a couple of months. But yeah, basically we kind of departed from the idea, you know, it might be a little bit the same everywhere. Like maybe everyone's suffering from gentrification, and that kind of gentrification is going to be a little bit the same, and blah blah blah. And then when we started our research, turned out like first off, people have been here for such a long time, been doing so much stuff that we didn't had no idea about. The way we have not been able to receive the information, even of like for me specifically as a Belgian citizen living in Brussels, and I had not learned about so much of the history of Matonge and what people have accomplished there. It was very shocking to me. That was one thing I was very, you know, strong, because you always think like, you know, in London these neighborhoods have been there so much longer, and that is the case, but at the same time, like, we have also been creating spaces in Belgium for a very long time.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Yeah.
Just wanted to add that that is something that I've structurally seen within our specific research, but also like in general, that diasporic francophone realities are very much erased from the narratives of blackness and black identity in the diaspora. But even when we talk about continental Africa, we could say that like a lot of like the Nordic European countries are so much like invested in understanding black narratives coming from an African American viewpoint, especially in the Netherlands, that like neighborhoods such as Matonge were pretty complex to detangle, as opposed to the narratives that we were much more accustomed to that we found in London.
Yeah. But at the same time, we did see some cautionary tales. So we did have the kind of the idea of, you know, like these neighborhoods were created, then they would, you know, go to like some kind of renaissance, you know, almost, and then you have gentrification coming in, because now like the neighborhood's popping, so everyone's coming in, and then, you know, everyone's leaving, and it turned out to be so much more complicated than that. For example, Matonge, the amount of people of color that own houses in the neighborhood is extremely low. When people from the Congolese diaspora first came to Belgium, for example, these are quite rich people. They bought houses in Woluwe Saint-Pierre and those kinds of neighborhoods, a lot more wealthy neighborhoods. On the other hand, you have also neighborhoods like Notting Hill, which are quintessentially Afro-Caribbean neighborhoods, where now there is almost nothing left of that heritage, unless it's in some kind of what you would call like jerk chicken fusion bar, you know, like that. So that's what remains, like a fusion kind of version of what was used to be a very strong cultural place. And I remember doing an interview with someone who was an activist there for years and years, and he just said like it's just become a non-place. It's become a place without a soul. Like from a very strong cultural place, we've become a place that is supposed to acquiesce the norm, but no one knows what that norm is, so that norm is just empty. But that's not happening everywhere. Like there are people in Matonge that say that things are going much better than they used to, while there are people that are saying, oh no, the neighborhood is dying. So these narratives of like rise and fall are so much more complicated in reality, and seen through the different lenses of people, so much there's so much difference there.
Yeah. And the complexity of that is interesting, and it is interesting that even as two women of specific and are with both different respective African descendants, we, even as in the way we are and in the cultural capital that we in a way have, didn't start the project off with that being as aware of that complexity as that we are now. And that also says something about what has been mentioned earlier about, how the stories will be told by others, and not in a way that, that really reflects reality. One of the other structural things that we found in those neighborhoods is the question of maybe diasporic tribalism in a way, because of there's this discussion about whether to call these neighborhoods black neighborhoods or African neighborhoods, right? Because as multi-scholar as Europe is in terms of the various different ways in which they've received, communities that migrated to Europe. Even a place such as Molenbeek could be called an African neighborhood because, Morocco is in Africa. Or in another way, for example, in the Bijlmer in the Netherlands, it is a neighborhood that is mostly Ghanaian and Afro-Caribbean, and then the question poses itself: does the name African neighborhood suit the place that we're describing, because of the fact that African stories have been mostly told through an Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean, but mostly African-American lens, and the reason why I call this like a kind of diasporic tribalism is that because of the fact that we come from this space of being from African descent ourselves, we get to engage with this topic from a certain. We get to engage with topics that are a little bit more, let's say, that hurt within the community, like the discussion about the good immigrant versus the bad immigrant. Like in Belgium, there's the conversation within between Congolese and mostly Rwandese communities, where it's like. Me as a Rwandan, I can say that Rwandan people are mostly seen as the better colonial subject. And then there's the question of, are we going to solve this together within the community, or is this something that we're going to correct by speaking to white institutions and whiteness and white people? So that's a question that kind of brings us to one of the reasons why we started this project, is to really research if things such as an Afropean identity could exist as a political identity, as reflective of a political reality. And because of this diasporic tribalism, this is a very complex thing to answer. Maybe you have something to add.
Yep.
Yeah. So as of now, we're in a very we're in a space where we're gonna publish our first article on the 30th of June.
Does anyone know why the 30th of June? Yes. Okay.
What is it? Yes. Thank you.
Exactly. So, a year ago, we published our first article, also on the 30th of June. That was because of the inauguration of Lumumba Square. You can see it here. It's the tiny dot here on the far end of the map in the red there. There's the newly inaugurated Lumumba Square. People have been fighting for it for 15 years, so it was a privilege and a pleasure to write an article about these people who have been fighting for it, and that was our first production in this project. And now, exactly a year later, we will be putting forth the entire thing.
So it will be published in Dutch and Belgian media, in the Standaard in Belgium, and in the Green Amsterdammer, the Groene Amsterdammer in Amsterdam. And also in in podcast form. And of course, because of this, these like stories being very like diasporic centered, we've also thought about like publishing them in different languages, specifically French and English, to be reflective of also the communities that have told these that were telling the stories that are telling their story through us, because that's really what it is. So yeah.
I do want to say when what you said something. We are not the perfect interlocutors of these narratives. It's a large project, and for example, we are not of Peckham, we are not of Chateau Rouge, so we cannot perfectly mirror the experiences of people who live there and who have been there for a very long time. But I have to say at the same time, I think full authenticity can be a trap sometimes, and I think we do need to be careful to the point where we're still able to tell stories, but we have to do it in a way that you would want to have a story told about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I do realize that there is no perfect way to do this unless you're writing about your own life. Then there is no perfect way, there's no perfect authenticity to claim. So we're not trying to do that as well. Like, we know we can't. So let's just leave it at that. We're just collaborating with a lot of people and paying them. Sorry, I think that's a very important point to make. We're collaborating with a lot of people and we're paying them to make sure that we can get a form of intersubjectivity instead of like a false idea of objectivity. And then, yeah, can we go to reading?
Yeah, can I add something?
Yeah. At this point, we can keep talking.
Yeah. Just the last thing. I think that's important. What she said, but also interesting because of the backgrounds that we have, we're kind of like hyper sensitive and hyper aware of that, our positionality, in a way that I think our like white colleagues, our white male colleagues are not necessarily. And and period. And yeah, that also says, like, within this project we've often told each other, like, we wish we had like the self-explanatory way of making that mediocre white men have, because that's reality when you're making journalism, when you're writing as a black woman. And we'd like to end with our project name, a working definition of how we are mapping Black or African Europe, and also its complexities, and then read a part of our work that's going to be published on the 30th.
But it's in Dutch. Sorry. Dankzij de Mambo werd Matonge in de jaren 80 een vrijhaven voor de Afrikaanse elite. Als je niet in de Mambo was geweest, dan was je niet in Brussel geweest. Vieux Henri Kadiebo Hoekens vertelt ons zijn verhaal op een late vrijdagavond. We nemen zijn woorden met de nodige ernst, want hij komt niet zomaar aan de bijnaam Vieux. Als getuige van het eerste uur is zijn kennis over de wijk ongeëvenaard. Kadiebo zit in zijn appartement als een edelman, op een leren troon met extra rugsteun. Hij wijst naar zijn rechterarm in een steunverband en naar zijn gezwollen voeten. Het is de artrose en de leeftijd. Door de hitte kleven zijn leren zetels aan onze huid. Terwijl zijn jongste zoon ons ieder een warme Jupiler brengt, blijft de televisie op het hoogste volume spelen.
Kadiebo blikt terug op een van de bewogen nachten in zijn club. Mobutu Sese Jr. had toen de Mambo afgehuurd voor de verjaardag van zijn vriendin. De zoon van de toenmalige president van Zaïre was zelf niet komen opdagen. Om toch nog iets van haar avond te maken, scande de jarige de ruimte op zoek naar een danspartner. Haar oog viel op hem. Hij durfde de dans niet te weigeren. Kadyebo had het niet hoog op met Mobutu en was een Lumumba-aanhanger. Maar zijn club draaide op de goede wil van vrouwelijk schoon. En zo dansend op de rumba vergaten ze even dat ze omringd waren door haar bodyguards. Tot het koppel het iets te gezellig maakte en de bodyguards de wapens trokken.
Dankjewel.